Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 26, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
So, the last 5 or 6 days have featured a flurry of activity relating to the executive branch and Donald Trump extending what he believes to be his executive powers in highly problematic ways. We spent much of the Biden presidency bemoaning and complaining and attacking the Biden administration's extra-constitutional behavior in a variety of manners. The behavior by the CDC using executive power to suspend rent increases and evictions, the Centers for Disease Control taking over the housing market in the United States, student debt loan forgiveness, which was a big one. Almost every week it seemed like there were things that the Biden administration doing that seemed like constitutional atrocities to us. And I have to say that things that Donald Trump have been doing are very much in the same category of appearing to be constitutional atrocities, and simple honesty requires that while some of us at least have been delighted by some of the efforts made by the Trump administration on civil rights, Title VI, anti-Semitism, the campuses, Israel, Iran, and the like, we can't be silent when these things happen that have happened before that we found fault with. And whether they're politically popular or not is really not the question. So the latest, the big one, the one that we're going to hear the most about is his announcement that he is removing one of the Federal Reserve board members, Lisa Cook, on the grounds that she can no longer serve because there are supposedly issues with her statements on a mortgage application. It's clearly pretextual. She has not been charged with anything. No authority that we know of has actually brought any kind of action against her. There is a member of the Federal Housing Commission who has been pushing this matter, a guy named Polte, whom I've never heard of before. The Supreme Court, in ruling earlier this summer that Trump did have the power to remove members of supposedly independent boards, like the Consumer, I can't remember what it's called, the Elizabeth Warren Consumer Commission.
Financial Protection Bureau.
Something like that. That yes, the president does have the power to remove and to do things with, because they are in fact executive agencies. Specifically, in its opinion, said you can't go near the Fed. The Fed is, of all the agencies, actually quasi-independent, and the president does not have executive authorial power over the Federal Reserve, and he has clearly decided to challenge that or to push this matter, either because he sees no political harm in saying he wants to remove a Fed chairman for cause and scare the Fed chairman and maybe get her to quit because it's too much money to defend herself in court, which it will be. I mean, as she has already said, Lisa Cook, that she will contest this matter. That's not cheap, and I don't think she can get the Fed to pay for it. So, this is a form of intimidation, an effort to, use presidential power to force a political opponent from office somebody he deems to be an opponent, or someone whom he thinks is in the way. So that may not harm him particularly, but it harms us as a nation. Anybody have any thoughts on where all this is? Then we rating John Bolton, saying he's going to go after Chris Christie. We talked about these yesterday, and then some other stuff like Christine's favorite, which is the executive order criminalizing the burning of the American flag, which is already a settled constitutional question, was settled by the Supreme Court 30 years ago or longer ago.
1989, Texas v. Johnson.
There we go. 36 years ago,
Yeah.
Where, this was a very serious matter, discussed very heavily. Part of the 1988 presidential campaign turned on the question of the American flag and how it was to be treated, and whether it was a sort of secular icon and therefore could not, it was beyond the bounds of speech. And in a famous opinion, actually, the most conservative member of the court, Antonin Scalia, said, no, if you own the flag, you can burn the flag. So,
well, and we should add to this the weird weasel words in this executive order. If Trump really cared about the desecration of the flag and wanted to criminalize its burning, he should get a constitutional amendment passed, because that's what it would take to do this, to have this exception to our very robust free speech rights. But that's not what he's doing. He's this I think is just pure performance art for him. And there are all these weasel words like, well, it's only if it's burned in the immediate time before inciting violence or rioting. Or so basically it's when you see those news images of people burning flags during a riot on the street, marching around. He wants to criminalize that. Well, that's still free speech. So this is the point where I think his understanding of the Constitution, or lack thereof, becomes very clear. The other one, of course, is that while we still have to bring up that the TikTok ban passed by Congress is still not being enforced. And he was speaking again this week about extending the time through which it should not, that TikTok is still allowed in the country, which is just a payoff to the Chinese Communist Party. And they've started a TikTok account at the White House. So this is all just completely flouting the way that our system of government is expected and should be operated. And that the TikTok thing should be shut down very quickly. And it hasn't been. People just shrug and say, I guess this is the new reality. We shouldn't be accepting this new reality.
Well, we should say that, largely when Trump pushes the bounds of acceptability, constitutionality, the court has swooped in here and there. Judges all over the country have paused, held objections to these actions. So I mean, from his perspective, from the administration's perspective, yet they want to do a lot of things, very obviously, and I think they're thinking, well, we'll just keep pushing, and the courts will do what they'll do, and they have listened to the court so far. I mean, that was the big sort of sci-fi level fear about the administration earlier on, that there were 9 billion stories. Will Trump defy the courts? That answer is so far no.
Yeah, and there's also the question of which actions he's taking that are intended as trolls and bait, and which actions are he intends to see as semi-permanent. Like the flag burning thing is, I think everybody's first reaction was accurate, which was, we're going to see a lot of flag burning now. And that's pretty much all that a flag burning executive order is going to do. People aren't, as Christine said, this is so settled that, but it is going to bait people into burning the American flag. And that's an issue that, people don't like the burning of the American flag, whether it's legal or not. And it looks like he's just kind of playing games with that. But then, there are these other ones, like the executive order that he signed yesterday about public safety is I'll read part of it. It instructs law enforcement agencies that are member of the DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force. I love that name, by the way. The Safe and Beautiful Task Force, who could be against that, to create and begin training, manning, hiring, and equipping specialized units that are dedicated to ensuring public safety and order in the nation's capital, that can be deployed whenever the circumstances necessitate. And the order directs the Secretary of Defense to create a specialized DC National Guard unit trained to ensure public safety and order in the nation's capital when its activation becomes necessary. So that sounds like a permanent thing that is going to be under the rubric of the Department of Defense, and just creating new, creating new bands of enforcers, that sort of thing doesn't go away, right? Because if you create a program within the Department of the Defense that creates a new special guard unit, it's not going to just disappear because people didn't fall for the bait or whatever. That's not so. There's two different types of issues here, and they're both bad, but there are going to be lingering uh, consequences for some of this stuff, because some of them are government programs and some of them are executive orders that will be smacked down, and the government programs themselves will linger on.
We should add to the list of bullying that John, you correctly listed at the beginning of the podcast, demanding of companies that the government get a stake in it. We didn't talk about this yesterday, but Intel and the government taking a stake in companies. As a free market conservative, I find this abhorrent. Also, it's just bad policy. It's bad economic policy. And I urge every single MAGA friend of ours who listens to us to consider, would you like President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez telling companies how to run their businesses and telling, this is the problem, is Seth's exactly right. Some of these things will have permanent legs, and opposition will use it very effectively as a weapon when they retain power, which they do, because that's how our system works.
President AOC owning Amazon, that's the...
I had a long conversation yesterday with a neocon, let's say neocon friend, who is very, very alarmed by everything that's going on. Wants, in part because of actions he thinks that Trump has taken that are heroic in defense of Israel, in attacking Iran, in going after the universities for their shameful conduct toward Jewish students. And yet he's looking at the panoply of Trump executive order efforts and saying, I just don't see how this is any different from the very reasons that I thought that Biden or Obama should have been impeached in other circumstances. And how is it different? And I'm freaking out, and I don't know where to go with this, or with the emotions that this is triggering in me. And I think the problem with the more apocalyptic interpretations of Trump's behavior, beginning in the first term, through the interregnum, and back to now, expressed probably best or most eloquently by Robert Kagan and others, is that Trump is essentially attempting to destroy the institutional foundations of the United States and replace our constitutional system with something much more autocratic. That we are in a period of revolutionary change. We're living through it. We always wondered what would happen if we had to live through such a period, and we're living through it now. And one of the ways that we're dealing with it is by pretending that it isn't really happening, but it is really happening. And, here it is. And I think that overestimates Trump's ideological purpose, or his purpose in taking and maintaining and returning to power, which is not an effort to structurally redefine the United States to be a strong man's paradise. It is he. It is, I want to change things. You want to stop me. And then you spent 8 years trying to stop me using all of these unbelievably illegitimate methods and means that go under the rubric of lawfare, right? I mean, sort of the deep state stuff, pursuits by intelligence agencies and the FBI and Crossfire Hurricane and various other things, and then on to the 7 indictments during the period in which he was out of two impeachments. Then he's out of office, 7 indictments in federal and then state level here in New York and in Georgia. And you're just coming after me. And I want to do what I want to do. And FAFO, you want to F with me, I'm now going to F with you. You're going to be my national security advisor and go write a book that's hostile to me after all I've done for you. Well, when I get back into power, I'm going to take a hammer and try to hit you over the head with it, because that's what I do. If you're Chris Christie and you're going to go on ABC's This Week and say nasty things about me, I'm gonna look into Bridgegate, because that's what I get to do as president. That's what they did to me. I'm going to do it to you. I'll do it to anybody. And if I get a good idea, and just because Congress is so slow, I'm going to enact it and then see what you can do to stop me. That's what Obama did. That's what Biden did. That's what Obama did with the DACA, and that's what Obama did when he said, "I have a pen and a phone, and I'm not going to wait for Congress to act." He did that. Biden did all the stuff I mentioned at the beginning. So don't come at me like I'm just using the tools that Democrats used before me and after me, executive orders. And so the hell with you. And I think that's appalling. But I don't think that there is a systematic effort to undermine the United States of America. I think that's he's a very contextual person, not a theoretical person. He is not, didn't write Mein Kampf. He's not trying to impose a new idea of democratic or populist order in the United States. He just wants to do what he wants to do and thinks that these niceties that we're mentioning are forms of unilateral disarmament, that the Democrats get to do whatever they want to do. And then when we come in and try to do what we want to do, then you all get all hysterical and say, we're fascist. You're the fascist. You're the one who wanted to just forgive 35 million loans, though, that are matters of private contract.
Yeah, Trump's support, we're coming at this as, hey, look, Trump's doing this, Trump's doing that, Trump's doing that. His supporters come at it entirely differently. They're saying, no, this is mid-fight. This is, this started long ago. This has been a sort of battle by battle for him. He is pushing back on those who would destroy him. He did speak at some point after being reelected of sort of that being not vengeance enough, but sort of, after having said, "I will be your retribution," he seemed to say, "No, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm not going to." They're the ones who criminalized everything. They criminalized it, not me. I weaponized it. They weaponized everything. I'm not going to weaponize everything. Clearly, he can't resist weaponizing institutions.
Well, and there's just one, we're calling them niceties, and that I think already shows how transformative the culture has become around the erosion of norms. Because you're absolutely right, John, and Abe's correct too, that MAGA supporters they're right to point to a number of these things and say Democrats did them first. But the erosion of those norms, if it just keeps going back and forth, we have them no longer. And what that means is there is a newness to the quality of the things Trump is doing now, because the norms have been eroded by both sides. What I see with a lot of MAGA supporters, particularly the sort of self-appointed MAGA intellectual types, the activist intellectual types, is that they say, I don't really care about the principles behind whether or not people should be allowed to burn flags. We have bigger battles. That is what happens when there are no more norms any longer. And when a very engaged faction of either political party has contempt for norms, because we do need to restore and rebuild these. And the courts have been the last resort. Abe was absolutely correct to point that out. But it's the same reason why it's very frustrating. I thought a ton of Biden's pardons were just execrable. I think we should completely reform the president's pardon power. I also think it's terrible that Trump gave blanket pardons to the January 6th participants. I mean, these sorts of things, the back and forth, the average voter looks at and goes, what are we any longer? So restoring norms is very difficult, and you do need at least one branch of government to cling to them. Right now, that's the courts. But again, Congress is really the place where these things need to be restored. He's not going to Congress for any of this stuff. But he is sending J.D. Vance out, to chill the big, beautiful bill and try to persuade people that this is all good. I don't see him trying to use the levers of constitutional power in a way he could. He's got a Republican majority. Why not use that? So I do think it's a little different in the sense that he has contempt even for the process, even if he doesn't want to completely undermine it.
Yeah, I mean, he said yesterday, like, I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna put my posse comitatus executive order to Congress, and I was like cheering. I was like, that's great, because in the past, if you wanted to so-called politicize an issue, I mean, this is politics. I hate using the word politicize for things that are political, but if you wanted to play games with this stuff, you would go to Congress with something that that would put the Democrats in a difficult position saying no. That's what you would do. You would put them on the record saying no cops or whatever, right? And what Trump does is he just skips that whole part. And there are all these ways that you could go through the system that you could gain the political benefits from, as they say, heightening the contradictions or whatever. If he wants to highlight the fact that he believes in public order and Democrats don't believe in public order. And you know what? If you ask Democrats, they would say, no, I don't want cops on the streets of DC. I want social workers. The move would be to put it in a bill and try to force a vote on something like that. And so, when he jokes about that. He said, well, I would even put this in front of Congress because it's so, it's so popular. But he's not going to do it is the thing. It's like a tease. He knows that he understands that he could do this in a much more, a much more legitimate way, but also a way that conforms to the norms of the past, which is that even if you're doing this to play games or politicize something, there is a legitimate way to do that through the levers of the law now, that you don't actually have to set new norms or break old ones to do so. And he seems to be aware of that and just goes around it anyway.
So one of the norms that we were told over the last couple of months has been breached, and that is horrifying because of all of the good that the norm did before Trump breached it, is this question of whether or not to withhold grant monies to universities particularly for their health research, because these universities have behaved in execrable fashion on Title VI and civil rights matters, and that basically this is something the administration is willing to go into negotiation with these universities on what kind of fines they're willing to pay, to acknowledge, even if they don't specifically in the documents that accompany the fines, acknowledge their wrongdoing, that it makes it that they've established the precept that if they go back to the way and do the things that they did before, that there is a precedent for them getting the hammer brought down on them, and that this is all terrible because what they do is so wonderful. They're doing all this wonderful medical research, and it's just wonderful and great. And Trump and the Trump people who are involved in this are like, it may or may not be great, but these institutions have been behaving as though they have a right to this federal money. They don't. It comes with strings. The strings are obeying the laws of the United States. And if they don't get the money. And if they agree to stop, and they're going to they will fulfill X, Y, and Z efforts to show that they understand that they did wrong, and that they're going to stop doing wrong, and that they're going to start doing right and handling things in the right way, then we can turn the spigot back on. So there's a case in which the norm, which is not a constitutional norm or anything like that, the norm is you give us money from the government and we do whatever we want, and we're prestigious, and we have the entire editorial boards of every newspaper and every elite person in America on our side, and we're going to make immense trouble for you. You leave us alone. And that's something that Trump is not only immune to, but welcomes the fight for. And so do the people under him. Then you get to the lawfare stuff, and you hire Dan Bongino, and you hire Kash Patel, and you hire whoever this guy is who wanted to pursue Lisa Cook at the housing agency and all of that. And there's something different, because as I say, I don't think Trump wants to rewrite the Constitution. Or rewrite our constitutional norms.
No, he just wants to ignore it.
But they do. The MAGA intellectuals, if you want to call them that, or the sort of activist intellectuals, the same crew of people in some weird way that in the 1930s with FDR, or in the 1960s with JFK, who came in from the academy, highly educated, with all kinds of cockamamie socialist intrusive ideas about economic behavior and all that, and sort of populated the administrations and started in on what would devolve into both the New Deal and the Great Society, both of which were very serious efforts to go at norms and even constitutional norms, though with legislation, to be fair, unlike executive orders. That's what these guys are doing now, but actually they kind of do want a strongman. They want the 2 levels under Trump. They want a new system in which the effort to go at liberals and to change culture, to revolutionize culture away from liberal norms, makes this not only legitimate but moral, and not only moral, but people like us who are saying, "Oh no, you can't do this and you can't do that." We are effectively ceding the high ground to the enemy that wants to destroy America. They want to save America, and America is not saved by hewing to constitutional niceties and norms. America has to be defended in urban trench warfare, in which you come at us with the debt forgiveness. We're going to come to you with, we're seizing 10% of Intel, because this is also our way of controlling Intel's wokeness. Now Intel won't be allowed to be woke because we'll be at the board meeting saying, we're the largest stockholder, you better not, have a diversity department or something like that. I've been trying to figure out what it is that they want.
Well, do they have? I don't think they have seats with Intel, right? That was part of the deal, or
I don't know. They don't, but that's why this is so mystifying in a certain way. If you sort of game it out, it's not clear why.
It's raw power. It's raw power.
Yeah,
it's meant to actually cow other companies that might try to push back against something that Trump might tell them to do. There's obviously something going on with China here too, where Trump is kind of blocking efforts. And on this part, again, I think this is very bad efforts on the part of some of our elected officials who are looking into the way China is trying to infiltrate some of these very crucial technology companies. But at the end of the day, they're doing the same thing that the radicals on the other side have long done, which is they go around the system by using claims of constant permanent emergency, which is we spent the entire Biden administration correctly criticizing for being an overreach of an executive authority. He's doing exactly the same thing. And the courts are looking at that in terms of the tariffs and all these other economic policies, but also executive orders. He's completely abused that. He just writes something down, has a photo op, signs it with his pen, and I think perhaps members of his administration think, well, unless the courts block us, now this is the law of the land. No, it is not. That is not how our system works. And I think constantly reminding people of that doesn't make us aiding and abetting the enemy. We've all at least tried to be honest in pointing out the errors when the Democrats do this, but it is setting a precedent for the future.
But so I'm dividing what I started with into 2. I don't know what you call tranches. So there is does Trump want to revolutionize America into a new kind of system? And I think the answer is no. He just wants to do what he wants to do. He gets mercurial ideas and he wants to enact them. And he knows that he's getting into fights with people that he can win because they're stupid. Because the left has gone nuts and doesn't understand that saying, no, don't stop crime is like a winning issue. Like there are people on the left, like Zohran Mamdani, who wants to end all misdemeanor prosecutions in New York City. And the fact that in the District of Columbia, apparently, they do not prosecute half the crimes that people are arrested for, which, of course, is very subduing of any police department wanting to do its job and all of that. And Trump simply highlighting that is like a gigantic political victory. And that's nothing, and that's fine. So he's taking on fights that he can win, that he understands in his amazing animal cunning way. It seems ridiculous to, like, even a fight over the American flag. Like, what does he want? Yeah, he's going to get communists in America to burn the American flag and then say, you see, they hate America, and they do, and they're showing it, and then that helps in 2026. So there's that. That's for political advantage and his own, again, also the stuff where he's like, oh, John Bolton, you think you can do whatever you want to do to me? I get to use my power to make your life a misery, which he doesn't, and he shouldn't, and it's awful. But I don't think that its purpose is to overhaul America. I'm not so sure that's true of Kash Patel, who is the one who sent the people to raid Bolton's house. I see no evidence or indication in the logic, the language, or the rhetoric, or the things that have been said since 2015 on Trump's behalf by this effort to create an intellectual framework for Trumpism, that they are not embracing a new kind of idea about America, which is that we are in a state of perpetual emergency because the culture war is so severe, because the left wants to redefine what it means to be literally human and what it means to be a male or a female, and because they'll go at anything and they'll try to seize all your money, and they'll use COVID powers to lock playgrounds and tell you can't go pray and that kind of thing. That is a permanent emergency, and the rules of the society have to be overthrown, and the constitutional norms have to be overthrown because they have tended in the direction of the people who are doing these terrible things. So the problem is that it impacts.
I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that's giving Trump a little bit too much the benefit of the doubt in
I'm
this
not
case.
giving Trump the benefit.
Okay.
Oh, you mean, am I giving him the benefit because I'm saying it's them and not him?
He might not have as his intention to completely disrupt and destroy our republic and its constitution. But chipping away, and it's not just norms, using these constant stress tests of our system at a time when there is a lot of polarization, a lot of anger, a lot of uptick in violence, could have the effect of an exhausted public just going, just fix it. And he plays on that all the time. And I do think that matters. And I do think his vanity here is a very important part of it. He's just unfurled some huge poster here in DC of his face on a federal building. That's ridiculous. And we should point that out, that's ridiculous. And as a conservative, we should be horrified at these things. He is not a conservative. And I know I'm going on an anti-Trump rant, and I'll get the usual amount of hate emails, and I welcome them because I'm just frustrated that even in the way that we talk about what he's doing, we need to come back to some standard of how an executive should behave. An executive who's beholden not to his own vanity, not to his own bank account or his own family or his followers, but to the people. And the people don't always agree. And he never acknowledges that. And I think that was Obama's problem too. The conceit, the arrogance of like, well, I know what's best. Trump has that as well.
But okay, rant over. I don't believe in the negative hate emails thing, because in our reviews, even our negative reviews are always like, but that Christine is pretty great.
That's going to end. That ends today.
But I think, you're like at 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. You don't even know.
Oh no, bring it. Yeah, no, I'm terrible. Bring it. Bring the criticism.
Okay.
No, I applaud Christine's rant, but I think there's also another unique quality with Trump that gives these, what John's talking about, these sort of second level administration staffers, the people who are sort of drunk on his power, that gives them an opportunity. And this is his quality, where if you come to him with something novel that seems to make sense on its surface without scratching it, without going one step deeper, he goes, yeah, why not? Sounds good. Yeah, it seems reasonable. Try it. So they have this great opportunity with him. He is willing to greenlight completely unorthodox ideas and approaches, and see where they go. He enjoys it.
So that's
a very great. That can work really well in some contexts. Yeah. I mean, that can be an effective leadership tool.
Make a ludicrous analogy. So the story I'm about to tell, I was 23. Trump is like approaching 79, right? So it's ridiculous for me to analogize myself as a 23-year-old to Trump as a 79-year-old and in his second term as president. But I became a manager very young at the Washington Times. I became the editor of a section there at a very young age. and then did some other stuff there. And I was always startled by the fact that I wanted to do what I thought were wild and creative things that I had a kind of license to do, and that the people under me, or the people who were working for me, who were older and more seasoned and more, professional, let's say, were always resistant. And it was like, this should be the other way around. Like, you should be coming to me with the creative, wild ideas, and I get to pick and choose. I'll do this one, but it's too much to do 3 or 4 of them this week. We'll do one, and then we'll have a conventional section on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we'll do something maybe a little weird on Friday or something like that. And that I always thought, isn't this wrong? Like, I'm not supposed to be the creative force. I'm the managerial force, but you're also unimaginative, and you don't seem to like want to do anything different or try to break the mold or anything like that. And Trump, it's like, don't come to me and explain to me how you can run the Justice Department 5% better. That's of no interest to me. I want to know how to do something fun. I want to do something new. I want to do something fresh. And the distinction here between me and Trump is that the people that I was working with really didn't want to do it, and they want to do it. That's all they want to do. Like, they don't want to run the Justice Department properly. Having said, look, here's how Biden and Obama ran the Justice Department improperly, and how the deep state under Trump in the first term sought to control the levers of power at the Justice Department, and we had to have an internal civil war over it to control them. They want to screw around with the gears of power. That's why they're there. That's what they want. That's all they hunger for. It's not, we can do this better, and when we're done, this country is going to be 12% better than it was. And that's pretty great, because this country is pretty great as it stands. This country is a charnel house of garbage, and we are cleaning the Augean stables. We're going to take this literally Herculean task and clean the Augean stables. We're going to revolutionize the intelligence agencies. That's what Tulsi Gabbard is trying to do, and we're doing this at the FBI. Trump didn't come up with the posse comitatus idea. Obviously, he's not like, let's get lots of little new soldiers. It's not going to happen, obviously, and so that's where I get scared for the future. In an odd way, Trump isn't a revolutionary. But I don't know that the Republican Party is not training itself to be a permanent revolutionary force. And that's very frightening, because we also have, and what's going on in the Democratic Party? The revolutionary forces in the Democratic Party, we're already talking here about people like Obama and Biden, who were not revolutionaries, right? They really weren't. Like, temperamentally, they certainly weren't. And yet they, of course, took on revolutionary authority or revolutionary powers because it was just too alluring not to let a crisis go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel said when he was Obama's chief of staff. But actual revolutionaries are taking over the Democratic Party. Mamdani
But isn't Biden actually a very good point to raise, though, because it was the people around him too, right? I mean, this is the threat that you're describing is one in which you don't need a revolutionary minded person. Right. In the Oval Office,
who could just be the front.
This stuff to go on all around, right? Trump does love messing with stuff and breaking stuff, but the point is that a confused Joe Biden could lead to a whole shadow State Department and all this other stuff.
But the other vanity are things we should vote against in the future.
Absolutely, but I'm just saying
the other thing that's the problem with this way of thinking is that the emergency, we encountered this first in 2016 in a big way because of the Flight 93 mentality, which, was, the sort of intellectual framework for living as if we are in a state of emergency. And the thing about the state of emergency is that, well, Trump's people were in charge. I know they'll say, well, that people were undermining us in the first term and we didn't know what we were doing, whatever. But this is his second term now. And at what point do we as citizens get to say to these people, all right, well, you've got 5 years, of governing under your belt. You've been running the Republican Party for a full decade now. If things are still getting worse, maybe you're not good at this. Maybe your, attempt to clean things up is only making things messier. And what kind of, in other words, are you just sort of doing the broken windows theory here, but the Paul Krugman version where he says, aliens, it would be great if aliens, he once said, would come down and break everybody's windows because we'd have all these window repairmen have jobs and the economic activity would boost, right? Are you like an army of Paul Krugmans in the federal government where you're just breaking stuff in order to have something to fix? I mean, that I think is legitimate. At what point do you get to say that people who are in charge, okay, well, show us some results, and you don't see it? And so it goes from being, well, we have to take emergency powers right now to stop this all from happening. And then it's, we have to keep emergency powers because look at the deep staters who are trying to undermine the reforms that we're doing and all this other stuff. And it becomes permanent, a permanent way of thinking and governing overnight.
Breaking norms to restore norms. I mean, is
but they don't want
both sides,
right. But they don't want to restore norm. That's where Christine is right about this. And you mentioned the Flight 93 mindset. Well, the author of the Flight 93 article is the director of policy planning at the State Department. Like, that's somebody who said America is already finished. So what we need to do is fly the plane into the ground and then see what we can do to recover our national spirit or whatever, rebuild. After the plane has already, been hijacked by the monsters, and then we'll see if we can kill them. That I don't even know what the analogy was precisely, but we kill them and we kill us and we start anew. So,
well, it was once the plane's going down, heroes have to step up and still do the right thing, right?
And still do the right thing by helping crash the plane. Right. Okay. So, but he's at State. Bridge Colby is at Justice. Vance has all these people around him. We know, people who were not acceptable in the first term of Trump, like Darren Beatty, the white supremacist speechwriter, has a serious position in the Trump administration. Those are the people, if I think long term, that's why I'm saying, like, it's not that Trump is Hitler, and I'm not saying that they're Nazis, but it is the question of what he leaves in his wake. And
I have a thought about that.
Okay, go ahead.
It's just a hunch. My hunch is that the American people, voters, the country, would reject a genuine revolutionary at the top. I think this is actually the closest they'll get. I think you almost need an intermediary type figure between
but that
them.
Biden was supposed to be that.
Yeah, but
that's literally why Biden got elected, was to say this, it's all gone too far. So we're going to appoint this broken down hack old guy who seems like he's got the temperament of a get along to go along person, and then he had no antibodies to fight the disease.
I mean, but what I'm saying is that, if the Trump successor is a true MAGA revolutionary, one of these people who wants to break norms, not to restore norms overtly, I don't think they will succeed electorally. That is my guess.
Okay,
because I think someone like Trump, the country said, well, he's a wacky celebrity billionaire. He's a different animal who has these revolutionaries around him.
Okay, let me get crushingly morose then in response to you,
sure.
Because we get back to the binary choice issue. So there was a binary choice between Trump and Biden, and Democrats got a do-over because they were heading down into the buzzsaw of the election with a senile, incompetent at the helm. And so they swapped him out for whoever they could swap him out for. So she wasn't a senile incompetent. she was an incompetent person of what seemed to be very modest intellectual capacities and ideas and interests, and she had nothing to offer. So we have two different efforts there to have the normal versus the crazy, right? Biden's the normal, but then he's not normal anymore because he's senile, and Harris is normal, but she's really, you can't imagine her sitting in the Oval Office. She's just too puny a figure to be run, the free world or something like that. 2028, binary choice. J.D. Vance versus AOC. Tell me, when you say electorally the country won't choose a revolutionary, the country doesn't choose the Republican nominee or the Democratic nominee. Parties do. Parties are not strong anymore. So activist wings of the party have more authority and more power. So it gets to J.D. Vance versus AOC. So choose your poison. It's not like there's going to be another option. And I know people say that's why we need a third party, or we need to. What about no labels? Maybe the third person. That's why Greek dramatists who couldn't figure out how to get themselves out of the bind they were in invented the Deus ex machina, right? The figure who, literally at the end of the play, God would come down from the sky and fix everything because there was no way to get themselves out of the plot. It's like in Dallas when you can't figure out how to finish the season, and so you say, "Oh, it was all a dream." It's not going to all be a dream, and we're going to have a choice between one of two. And right now, the real political question isn't, is it going to be Rubio or Vance? Is it going to be, is Mamdani the herald of the final takeover of the Democratic Party by its activist wing, as the Squad, which was only 5 or 6 people? Were they the heralds for a new future? I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think, and I wanted to bring this up maybe to conclude here, 2025 is an off year. So there are 3 elections that matter in this off year. There's a New York mayoral election, which didn't matter until this happened with this anti-Semitic Muslim communist winning the primary in New York City. And then you have the governorships of Virginia and New Jersey. And in those races in Virginia and New Jersey, you have figures that are theoretically the kinds of figures who would be the Democratic rivals to Mamdani, AOC, and people like that. Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill. What do they have in common? They both have Spanberger was a CIA official, Mikey Sherrill an Air Force pilot, credentials, congressman. They sit kind of pretty much in the center of their party, though that's really not the center of America. Spanberger, of course, the person who had a temper tantrum in 2020 about what happened to the House when she screamed at the Squad members saying, like, you nearly destroyed us, you nearly took us down and ruined everything, like, what's the matter with you? Saying defund the police, you crazy people. They could both lose. Like, Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger could both lose. Matt was talking about Spanberger yesterday, running this race against Winsome Sears. And Mikey Sherrill is running against Jack Ciattarelli. She's at 44% in every poll. There's a big undecided. If that's not a quiet Trump Ciattarelli vote, I don't know what is. What happens if Mamdani wins and the 2 moderate faces of the Democratic future lose in 2025 in an off-year cycle? I don't know what 2026 looks like in the Democratic Party, but it's like, okay, we gave it a shot. We nominated the people you say should be running the party because they'll be of more appeal nationally to people in these, they're not quite purple states, but they're close to being purple states. And guess what happened? Republicans won. You guys suck. You can't win. We can win.
Well, It'll be interesting to watch in the next week or so. Spamberger is now doing a big new ad buy that focuses on the economic costs of the big beautiful bill and why it's bad for the average American. And that is a very powerful message in that state in particular. And if that lands, I think she might shift her tactics away from the culture war stuff, where she's been absolutely floundering and way, way, way more extreme than the average American voter. So I think that's a sign that maybe they recognize they need to change tactics. And, the economy will remain the very important issue for most voters in this midterm. And it is still quite volatile. And we have still not experienced the price increases that will come as a result of the all these wonderful tariffs that we're constantly told. There's kind of a strange suspended reality right now economically, but people are nervous. Companies are not doing new, rounds of investment and growth and all the stuff that you would want to see. Everyone's kind of holding their breath. But by 2026, we'll see where we're headed. And I fear it's not going to be as sanguine an economic environment for a lot of voters then. And can the Republicans capitalize on that? No, they're going to be explaining it. They're going to be asked over and over in town halls to explain that.
And Spamberger, by the way, is also the other question about the moderates is that do they even matter? Like, if a moderate falls in the forest and, nobody's around to hear it, does the moderate exist? I mean, Jewish Insider, the publication, has been doing something very interesting recently, which is they've been, anytime Trump or somebody in a Republican state senator somewhere in Idaho says something controversial, right? The entire press goes after every Republican they can find, says, what do you think about this? So the Jewish Insider has been doing that with regard to some of the anti-Zionist staffers that have cropped up around insurgent Democratic politicians around the country, in mayoral races, in and some of these upcoming elections, and they've been asking the moderates, hey, how do you feel about this? And the moderates have kind of been running scared, and then then they will print a story that says, we couldn't get Abigail Spamberger to go on the record about, this Virginia, Democratic House leader who's saying all this crazy stuff. And then she'll see a bit of a backlash, and 2 days later she'll call them or send them a press release that says, I abhor hatred of all kinds or whatever. And then the same thing will go on in Minnesota, where a lot of this is happening now. And so how much does it matter for the future, for the trend, if Spamberger and Sherrill win? I think Sherrill is in a position where, because it's New Jersey, even though New Jersey has been creeping closer to a purplish state and everything below the state level, really, because it's New Jersey, people will just say, well, she ought to win, and whatever. But for Spamberger, Virginia goes back and forth, and the moderates are running from the non-moderates. The Spambergers and the Sherrills are afraid to cross the Mamdanis of the Democratic Party.
I don't think it matters if they win. I actually don't think it matters if they win. I think it's going to matter a whole hell of a lot if they lose. That's part of the point I'm making here. If they win, they're both leading in the polls. So that would indicate that, these are states that are largely, or sort of trend red more than they trend, they trend blue more than they trend red. This is not a huge year. It's not going to be high turnout. They'll win. Maybe they'll win by a smaller margin than one expects, but they'll win. But if they lose, then it's the Tea Party all over. It's like, why are you even running these faceless, colorless, meaningless people who don't even have the courage of the conviction to push for the kinds of robust, progressive ideas that we need to save this country? You took over. You got the people you wanted. They're there. You ran them. You spent $100 million trying to get them elected, and they lost. You're done. We're the future. You're the past. That's what happens if they lose. If they win, the fight goes on. as it is now. I don't think it's going to say, oh my God, we need everybody, Abigail Spanberger is going to be the president of the United States. But a defeated Abigail Spanberger is a much larger political figure than a victorious Abigail Spanberger in a very odd way, because she points to the argument that can be made that the middle of the road Democrat, as we now define them, even if she's not really middle of the road, is a dead end that leads to defeat, and that we are up against unprecedented populist forces that have real seductive power, and we need to fight fire with fire. So there's nothing to be said until November to see what happens in November. I'm going to make a recommendation very quickly. There's a movie that opened on Friday on a relatively limited number of screens, so I don't know if it's going to be playing in your area. It's called Relay. It was made by David Mackenzie, who directed the really superb bank heist thriller Hell and High Water back in 2016. If anybody remembers, that movie was unexpectedly nominated for Best Picture. It was Taylor Sheridan, was the great sort of not debut, but like annunciation of Taylor Sheridan. The guy went on to write Yellowstone and Landman and Tulsa King and Mayor of Kingstown, and sort of revolutionized television. That movie, Hell and High Water. This is David Mackenzie's latest movie, and it's a thriller about a fixer who helps people when they've gotten out on a limb too far as whistleblowers, and they want to sue for peace against the companies that they're blowing the whistle on, because the companies are coming after them with extra legal means. And this guy figures out how to negotiate a settlement with extra legal means. And the way he does so is through a communication system where no one knows who he is. And he communicates through a system for the deaf, where a hearing person can speak to a deaf person over the phone, because the deaf person types, goes to a place called Relay, and the person on the other end transmits the message that is being read. And this is how this system works. And it is a corker of a thriller. Very unusual, very powerful, very interesting, new kind of setting, new kind of plot, new kind of hero. And why it's sort of sneaking into theaters this way, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have any stars in it. It stars Riz Ahmed and Lily James, and actually the guy who plays the lead in Avatar, Sam Worthington. So it's not no one you ever heard of, but and I don't want to oversell it, but it's really good if it's anywhere in your ambit. If you can find it in a theater near you, this really is worth a night out. So that's Relay, in theaters now. It will also be good on streaming, by the way. It's small, so it's not that you need to see it on a big screen. So you could wait, but you could also go see it if you need a good night out at the moment. So we'll be back tomorrow. For Seth, Christine, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.